Hello, and welcome to the Grand Cinema Hotel, a podcast hosted by two friends who love cinema. I'm Gus, and I'm joined by my co-host Alvaro. Tonight, you'll be staying in room 151, The Fabelmans, the semi-autobiographical coming-of-age film directed by Steven Spielberg. So go ahead, get comfortable, and throw on that Do Not Disturb sign as we enjoy the magic of the movies with The Fabelmans. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Movies are dreams that you never forget.
What is going on, all my fable men, women, they, them, NBs, and everything in between? Welcome back to the Grand Cinema Hotel. I'm joined by Alvaro.
What's up, guys?
And we are here to talk about the latest and greatest from one of the GOATs himself, Steven fucking Spielberg. This is kind of a touchy subject to me because this is one of those filmmakers that we rarely ever talk about because it's almost like what's left to be said about Steven Spielberg that hasn't already been said. But, you know, we are lucky enough to still live in the time where people like Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg are releasing movies. So how are you not going to talk about a new Steven Spielberg movie? You know, like, I don't know about you, but I do feel that this man has earned 2-3 lifetimes worth of respect just off of some of his previous work. But yeah, man, The Fabelmans. We saw this early. If you were listening to this now, you are hearing this in the future as we're recording this a couple weeks before Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
However you celebrate or don't celebrate that controversial day. I always see it as a day to just, eat a shit ton of food. And I do like going to the movies on Thanksgiving. So I couldn't think of a better holiday family coming of age story than this. Like, this is
True.
One of those reasons why Spielberg knows exactly what he's doing, why he is not only a film genius, but a marketing and production genius as well. Of like, what if around the holidays we decided to celebrate me? You know, like I'm one of the greats. My story's never really been told, so who better to tell it than me myself? You know, so I enjoyed this film quite a bit. Alvaro, how did you feel about The Fabelmans?
Yeah, The Fabelmans. I think good Thanksgiving film, like you said. Pretty straightforward coming of age film.
This is his first coming of age film. Of all the genres he's made, he's never done coming of age before.
It seemed very tensionless. This movie is very tensionless. The small tension that there is there seems to be it's just very realistic. You know what I mean? I think even you'd said in prior just conversations with him that some of the things that he shows in this movie weren't necessarily, besides the parent stuff, obviously, the other stuff wasn't that prevalent, but it was just during that same time. So I do think a lot of this film's like dilemma in terms of any other film, like usually when your character has to go through these tropes, I don't think there's very much of this. This is a very vibes heavy movie, so it's enjoyable in that sense, and I do think it's a perfect Thanksgiving movie.
This is the latest in a line of a recent trend in movie making of directors making nostalgia movies, whether it be based on their own life or an idea of what the time was like when they grew up. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood really kind of forefronted this. I mean, you could argue that Richard Linklater is one of the people who really started this with Dazed and Confused and movies like that, where it is more about a vibe and an idea of a time than it actually is about the story taking place. And you know what? I enjoy this film a lot more because it's very earnest in what it is. I am kind of sick of the whole, like, I don't want to say like the A24 angle, but like the indie trauma of like, my life was so fucking hard growing up. I hate everything. And it's like Steven Spielberg has gone through some real life shit that, like, just like everybody else has, but he still has that positive outlook on how to spin this into a lovable story. You know, like I told you before the pods, like, this isn't a movie that has good guys or bad guys. This is a movie about real life and how real shit happens. And, you know, the ability to kind of see your parents as people and not just your parents. Like, that's really what I took away from this movie, is how from a young age, Steven Spielberg saw his parents in a different light than maybe some others do. Like, that illusion kind of being shattered of like the perfect happy family. And for him to, for this divorce in his life to turn into maybe inspiring more movie makers and imagination than any other filmmaker ever has is really falling upwards. You know what I mean? Like for some people, this could crush them. You know what I mean? Oh, my parents separated and it ruined my entire life. And Steven Spielberg's like, I changed the landscape of movie making because my parents got divorced.
Yeah, it's
a crazy flex on every level. You just know when you're watching a master, you know, like we've been talking a lot about movie lighting lately. And I remember before we got to the theater, I told you, I'm like, you know what I'm the most excited about is that I will be able to see everything in this movie and it will all be lit in an interesting, artistic way. Lots of lens flares, lots of artificial lighting. Just, if there's one thing Steven Spielberg knows how to do is to speak that film language and make these instantly iconic images, even if they're not like, he makes things iconic that shouldn't be, you know, it's a little boy looking at a train and you're like, why is this the coolest fucking thing I've ever seen before? You know what I mean? Like, it's just such a level of perfection in his movie making, you know? And like, I don't know this, I wouldn't say the story takes a backside to that in this, but what I'm always in awe of when I watch a Steven Spielberg movie, and now when I watch a Jordan Peele movie, is just the powerful way that they can convey imagery to just stick in your mind.
Yeah, I get what you're saying with like the train scenes in this movie.
There's a shit ton of them in this movie, but that's the one that really sticks out to me, you know?
Yeah, I get you.
And it's like the way his eye must work, like even from being a little kid, like just seeing things like that, that's a kind of like preternatural gift that most movie makers wish they could be born with. And in Steven Spielberg's case, you know, he can exaggerate as much as he wants, but you know, the proof is kind of in the pudding that this guy has understood the art of movie making from a very, very young age.
Yeah, it feels like this divorce is probably one of the most important divorces in American history.
Not just
in American history, yeah.
The history of art in general. Like, who could have ever seen the ripple effects of these two people divorcing, causing the entire movie landscape that we live in today, basically. But yeah, I had a really good time watching this movie. I thought, you know, an incredible cast. Paul Dano just doing his Paul Dano thing. Michelle Williams gives a wonderful performance. It was a quite different role for Seth Rogen. I had never really seen him in a role like this. I did think it was quite funny how Seth Rogen mentioned that he's like, I finally found my era of where I would be like a conventionally attractive man, and it just turns out that it was the 1950s.
Yeah, Jesus.
Like I was too. I would have been eye candy in the 60s.
Oh my God. That's funny.
So, I mean, do you have any overall first reactions or just things you kind of want to get off your chest in the beginning of this before we start kind of getting into it a little bit? I mean, I do want to stay pretty spoiler free. Well, this movie's kind of hard to spoil.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't really have any thoughts into reactions into it. I mean, yeah, I've never thought I didn't think this movie would be what it was about. And I guess it's because I haven't really read into his life. And, yeah, it was interesting to just it be very 2 hours and 45 minutes of just vibes. So that was interesting.
So we've had the licorice pizzas, we've had the Belfast, we've had the Romas, and I would say that this is probably on the higher end of the like nostalgic my childhood vibe movie. I do think the ultimate one is still Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I do think it's because it isn't so much about one person's life as it is the like idolization of a certain time
era, yeah,
you know. And like I think maybe for some of the faults in like Licorice Pizza, for instance, it's like too personal, you know what I mean? It was like a lot of people probably felt like because of like the age gap discourse and all this, and it's like, bro, I don't want to know about your like teenage perverted thoughts. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or like Belfast suffered from Roma being so good. You know what I mean? They're like, bro, you're literally just trying to make Irish Roma or Scottish Roma, you know? But when it's, you know, Steven fucking Spielberg, the guy can kind of do what he wants. And this is a movie too that feels like he could have done this 30 years ago. Why not? You know, but it sat there for a very long time. This is something he's contemplated his whole life of whether he should do this or not. And he kind of just, you know, if not now, when? Like, when is the right time to do this, you know? I know he's dealing with the loss of his father, who recently died in, I think, 2021. So he lost his mother 4 years prior. So this is also a part of the grieving process for Spielberg.
That makes sense,
making this movie. So it's very, very emotional, but also I don't think that it gets too caught up in that, you know? Like, here I go talking about Black Panther Wakanda Forever again, but like the outside stuff dealing with that movie was so involved with the actual plot because it had to be that I feel like that was one of the downsides of the movie. But in this case, it feels very therapeutic, kind of like a final just gasp of like, I need to get this off my chest and let this out, that this is how I really feel about my parents and what really spurred me in this direction in my life. So yeah, I really enjoyed the movie.
Yeah, I'm guessing maybe he feels that him too getting older, it has to be now in terms of who knows where his health is heading, and maybe he wouldn't be able to. Yeah, like,
Steven Spielberg's going to live forever, buddy.
Think so. Yeah, I don't know.
I know that he did say that because of the COVID lockdown and everything, that he was just feeling very reflective about his life because, you know, when you're somebody like Steven Spielberg, I'm sure you don't have a lot of time to just sit and think and contemplate about what your life has really meant. And he said now that his children are older and they're out of the house, and now that his parents are both gone, that he just really wanted to like sit there and think about like what his life has meant to him, and how the only thing that he could think of doing to grieve and kind of get over this like these losses in his life was to do what he does best, which is put his head down and work and make, you know, beautiful art out of it. And I just think that's really, really fascinating that we're kind of caught in this like experimental, like Kafkaesque experience of like Steven Spielberg dealing with the trauma of his childhood in front of the audiences of millions of people. You know what I mean? Like men would rather become the most successful director of all time than go to therapy, you know? And like, I'm glad that he has chosen to not get the help.
Yeah.
And make these movies instead, you know, selfish of me, but thank you. But yeah, man, I don't want to keep gushing forever, but I just really, really enjoyed this movie. And it's kind of hard for me to take for granted a good Steven Spielberg movie. You know, it's easy to take Ready Player One for granted, whatever. Okay, they gave Grandpa the 3D machine and they let him go wild. But no, I do feel like this is when you're Steven Spielberg, you can't really have a return to form, but I do think that this is like an uptick and like, okay, now we're going back in the why this guy is so good versus just, I don't know, maybe for a while it feels like Steven Spielberg, what's left for him to do? And I do think that this maybe felt like the last frontier of like, this is the big thing I want to tackle before my career is over.
Yeah, I mean, to be talking about him, like the first film we talked about was Raiders, and he's like very early into his career.
Yeah, it's like his sixth movie.
Yeah, and then to be still talking about him now, you know, what, 40 years later?
Well, yeah, I mean, he has 50 years of filmmaking, and he's had many, many phases, you know. To think of Steven Spielberg as the guy who made E.T. and Indiana Jones, like, he's not the same filmmaker, and he hasn't been for a very long time.
Yeah, it's been...
You know, like, in the early 2000s is really where he left behind the spectacle of filmmaking, and it much more became about the story of the movies, you know. Like, I do think that Catch Me If You Can and Munich were really this turn into a more serious, mature Steven Spielberg. You know, you have films like Lincoln, you have films like Bridge of Spies, you have The Post, and I did feel like this splits the difference between being like a like Oscar bait movie and like a genuinely entertaining piece of filmmaking.
Yeah, I can see that.
So do you not feel that way? I mean, your answer does not seem enthusiastic.
No. I guess I would say I do think it's like Roma to me. Like, it does seem very Oscar baitish. I don't necessarily think I see anything that would a general audience would really take away from. Yeah, I guess like you said, it's a Thanksgiving film. Besides that, like in terms of it being,
well, it's not. Like I said that. Like that's not how they're portraying it. Is like this is the take your family to go see this on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, because I'm just like it seems like the fact that it's so connected to maybe this would be a conversation you should have with your therapist in terms of making a movie. He turned it into a movie, which is good for him, I think. But necessarily as me in the spectacle, does it add anything to me? I don't necessarily feel that way in terms of it having any of what you said he left a long time ago, the blockbuster. Like I don't really see anything blockbuster. And like I said, this seems to be more just for him, this film.
Yeah, I mean it's very personal.
Yeah,
and I don't think nowhere has he tried to act like it's not.
Yeah,
you know, like yes, this is a selfish film to make. Like this is just for me to get this off my chest. But I I like that about this movie.
Yeah, no, I
Why
guess
should Steven Spielberg, of all directors, have to cater to what an audience wants versus doesn't he deserve the right to fucking make the movie that he wants to make, you know?
no,
If
that's
not
yeah,
him, who?
that's true. Like he could make the film that he wants.
Because it's not Martin Scorsese, be like, and really the only person who gets to make what they actually want is like, well, we recently talked about Todd Field, but consistently it's like Quentin Tarantino or Christopher Nolan, you know, they get to make whatever they want. Denis Villeneuve. And yes, Steven Spielberg, I'm not going to sit here and be like, he's not past his prime, but this is one of the living legends of filmmaking of, he's an important part of film history. So the fact that he has to open small in 2 cities because he can't open wide nowadays is really crazy to me as well. That he's like, he's now like seen as like he makes boring like Oscar bait fucking, these are not for everybody movies, and you're like, Steven Spielberg, like, what are you talking about?
But I guess that's what I'm saying, because based off of like kind of what you were saying, he moved himself based like that's what he wanted. He wanted to move away from the blockbuster because it's been a long time since he's done that, right?
Well, he did Ready Player One and the BFG, and those are not very good movies.
And so I think like that audience has completely. I don't think they're looking forward to this movie for those things, and the people who are looking forward to this, because we were talking about like Toronto International Film Festival is where this movie has been seen for the most part, and I think those are all people who have gone there that knew what they were getting themselves into. I've known about what this movie was before, especially because it's called The Fabelmans, right? Like kind of talked about
It's an
before.
awful name for a movie. I'm
It's
sorry.
like it's just so spot on. It's like if he wishes that was his last name, like I guess yeah, like that's kind of how I take it from it. And be like, you know,
to me, it's like Family Guy Brian. Like, oh, his name is Norm Hall because he's a normal guy.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, well, I'm a fable man. So I mean, that's just I think that the title is so spot on to what the movie is, and I think that's what I take it for. Yeah, it's a story about a storyteller, and that's what it is. I mean,
Spielberg is a guy who likes movies, who made a movie about a guy who likes making movies.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of the dynamics that we'll get into later, I think, is where, to me, it's kind of like, oh, it just seems like this happened in his life. So it's not like this is weird. And yeah, it's weird because it happened in his life. It's a very realistic situation. But I do think the way that his character kind of takes the situation, I kind of like, that's kind of weird. But that's like I don't know. It's a personal decision. I don't know if I can't get the whole story of his life in even 2 hours and 45 minutes,
No,
you know?
of course
So that's what I mean. It's like, I'm being shown a little window of time in his life, and then that's it. So to me, it's just a very vibe heavy movie, and it's interesting.
So would you say you like this movie? Yes or no?
I like it. Yeah. I just
Or
don't
is it
really,
more of a respect of like, yes, this is a good movie, but I do not vibe with it.
I just think
vibe with its vibe.
I just don't think it's not saying anything like besides it only lives in the realm of its own movie and Steven Spielberg. Like it's not adding anything to, like, I can't compare it to any other movie I watched this year because no other movie really had subject matter that had there's no problems in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, this is a specific to Steven Spielberg problem because he is the only person that is like him. No, there is no other Steven Spielberg. Not Denis Villeneuve, not Christopher Nolan. You know, like these people are interested in more like articulate intellectual sides of storytelling that he's not. Like he's the ultimate storyteller of like, you're going to feel good when you leave here. And I get now, we talked about this, like Everything Everywhere All at Once. That's the biggest gripe. It's like, oh, are you going to make me leave this movie feeling good? Are you serious? Like, what's wrong with that?
No, but I think like that's what I mean. Like I didn't walk out feeling good because it doesn't connect to me. Like, how does this have to do with me? That's how I felt about the movie. Like, this has nothing to do with any of the audience. You're just showing me your life, which is at this point could have been a documentary, right?
I mean, I don't know. Sure, if that's how you feel, be like, I don't feel that way.
Because it's like that's
go off, King.
Because like that's the part with this movie where it's struggling. Like, it's a good movie, yes, but I didn't walk out feeling anything because it doesn't relate to me.
You know what? Okay, let's just be brutally honest here. I'm a child of divorce, and I've always wanted to be a filmmaker. And Steven Spielberg has always been one of my heroes. So yes, to me, this film is extremely relatable. Of the like the imaginary version of your life that you wish could happen. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, he made the best out of like the quote unquote worst situation that he could. And like, I really enjoy that. And like, I do see that of like the winning through the, It's hard to say because it's like it's the suburban fucking version of a nightmare, which is just like, oh, I'm not gonna have a happy family anymore, and my happy family has been a lie my entire life, and how I need to cope and move on from that and use it as like a positive spin in his life versus just, I don't know, becoming a drug addict and hating the world because his parents became divorced or something like that. I just like, for me, that's why I personally am like, yes, this movie is speaking to me, and it's speaking to other people who have been in these like situations. I mean, obviously no one's going to be Steven Spielberg again, but you know, it's he has lived the fairy tale version of his life. So I don't know. That's why I like it personally.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe that's just like a little, yeah, 'cause it's just so personal to him having that relationship. My issues with it just comes in terms of how he dealt with those, like,
well, like,
the sides
let's dive
that
into it, I guess. So what do you mean by that? So what do you not like about how he handled his parents?
I do think it's weird how he kind of reacts to not being mad at his mom about it at all. I think it's kind of it's a weird thing to come completely be like, I understand why you don't like my dad, because the other daughter, which I think is the only character here that seems to be kind of like reasonable to me here, is kind of like, it's, why don't you like dad? Like, in terms of, you had 3 kids with this man. Like, why don't, if you were never happy with this guy, why were you with him for so long? What did he do that's so, because the movie portrays his dad as a saint. Like, the movie does nothing to portray his dad.
Which I don't understand why, because I've heard Steven Spielberg say some very unsavory things about his father in the past. So maybe his perspective has changed over time.
And that's what I mean.
But I don't think that he's talking about either of his parents like they're bad people. And is that what you want? Is for him to be like, my mom is a bad person?
No, but I'm trying to say there is no conflict in this movie, and I'm supposed to feel a certain way. But am I supposed to understand the mother? But what is the struggle? Why she's not with Seth Rogen's character? I don't know. There's no explanation as to why she likes Seth Rogen's character so much. Did the dad do something? Did they date before?
So you
like
want the inciting incident?
Or no? I'm just like, there is no, for 2 hours and 45 minutes. I'm being shown something that has no major conflict in it. But then
I do think that that's because it's from a kid's perspective. So it's not like she sat there and told him like, hey, I love this guy because this reason. Like, these are things that parents don't just like, I'm going to tell you why I'm divorcing your dad exactly. Like, it is a mystery for a while, you know, like it does take years for these things to come to light of, well, what exactly happened? Like, you know, there's things about my parents and their separation that I still don't know. And it's an illusion that I don't want shattered, you know, because I don't want to feel a certain way about either one of my parents. So that is why I do feel the connection to that of like, well, I can't look at you like my parents anymore. I have to look at you as 2 individual people. And it's more of an understanding of like, well, people are, as cliche as it sounds, like people go through shit that like you'll never be able to understand why they do it, but you just kind of have to, okay, well, like that makes sense to you. That's how you want to live your life. I'm not going to hate you for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I just don't,
you just do not agree with how he handled his parents' divorce?
No, because the movie also has bits where he doesn't want to make what the dad is making, kind of making it seem like him making a movie for his mom because she inspired him to start making movies is going to mean a lot for her, but even he doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And he only gets forced to do it because his dad is so, for some reason, such a noble king here, still trying to make her feel really good, which I still don't understand. Like, why was the dad also okay with her being, like, I don't understand the dynamic here, because we have a character here, the younger sister, who seems to be the only one here who's asking real questions, like, what is going on here? And even they don't have answers for those things. And I specifically be like, yeah, not to get too personal, be like, but my parents were about to get to that spot and I don't ask questions. So I find myself relatable to these things, but I was the kid asking like, this doesn't make any sense. And that's why, you know, to me, it doesn't. Yeah, it's crazy that he took this, or I think it is exemplary that he took this trauma and turned it into, I'm going to make movies, which is like, you know, I don't know if it's necessarily connected. That's the thing, is I don't see these 2 factors as connecting either.
So that it is a true story that he did make a movie for his mom where he witnessed these things that no one else had noticed. Like, he really did catch his mom like doing shit with another guy, like on camera. Like, so that is where this thing that she introduced to me that was supposed to be my gateway to like my creative happiness and who I am as a person has now been like robbed of me because I captured something that I never wanted to see or know. I mean, that's why he stopped making movies for a short time in his life, is because it like the art of movie making kind of betrayed him because he saw something he didn't want to see.
Yeah, and it seemed like in the movie just kind of always, because from the get-go when we were watching, we were looking at each other like, what is this relationship Seth Rogen and all three of them have together from the get-go? So it's like the movie very heavily shows that this has been going on before he made the movies, that they've had this relationship, all three of them, his mom, his dad, and the best friend. So to me, it's like this was never questioned before. Or like the dad seems to know that the mom wants to be with Seth Rogen's character, but why is that something he's okay with? I don't understand.
Like he's just a cuck. Be like, you just do not like that the dad is a cuck, correct?
Well, I mean, is that what he's trying to portray as? Because that's what you said. You have controversy in how he's portrayed his dad. So is his dad a cuck or not? Because if he is,
that's how he's playing it. Yes.
Because it seems very weird that it just seems very weird that he would want to have 3 kids and also be, like, it just seems weird because like Seth Rogen's character, does he want to be with her either? Because it's like he follows around and everything, but not to California. But why does all of a sudden not follow her? I don't understand those things. So maybe it's because
the only reason he didn't follow him to California is because the dad explicitly did not get him a job in California. He would have if he had gotten him a job, and that's where the conflict comes in between the dad. Okay, the dad is a cuck, like in this movie, you know what I mean? And he acts like one. So he's this kind, sweet man who refuses to get in any type of conflict, which I do think plays a huge part in the character of Sammy or Steven Spielberg of the why he would probably not react in a way that like a quote unquote normal person would react to this news is because, well, you only have what's around you. And if he's seeing 2 people of like, well, this awful thing is happening to my dad and I don't see him losing his shit or overreacting over it, that I guess that's how I'm supposed to act about these things. But throughout the movie, the dad constantly tries to not get Seth Rogen another job because he's trying to do this in the most unconfrontational way of like, well, if I don't get him a job with us where we move, then I can kind of just end this. And hopefully this like white elephant in my marriage will kind of just disappear over time. Like the constant hope of this will just go back to normal, you know, like, and I do know that from my parents being separated is like, there's an inciting incident. And then you're like, is this going to get back to normal? And like, usually the answer is no, it's not going to.
Yeah.
But you try your damnedest because of you want to give your kids a happy life. You don't want to admit that your life has been a mistake. There's like many different reasons why people handle these things this way.
Yeah. I guess it's because he was so cool with it at first, and then all of a sudden he's not, and I don't know the inciting incident of why he's not. So it's kind of weird to be like,
no, it's not a movie about his dad. It's
like
a movie about him, right?
Yeah, like Steven Spielberg is also okay with his mom doing this.
Well, it's not his choice. What do you mean? Is he okay with it? He doesn't have to be okay with it. She's going to do whatever she wants to do. She's his mom. She's a grown-ass woman. He's just a little boy. He's not going to be like, hey, stop cheating on my dad. And she's going to be like, okay, because that's what you want. I mean, one of the things she passed along to Sammy/Steven is that is some of this selfishness of like, you need to do whatever makes you happy in life, no matter if it makes other people unhappy or not, because you need to follow your own heart. And yeah, that's a very selfish way to live your life. But it is one of the reasons that Steven Spielberg is who he is, because he is a perfect blend of his 2 parents. You know, he gets that sweet genius intellect from his dad, but then he gets the creative, passionate, artistic side from his mother. And these are both 2 very flawed individuals. Like, he doesn't try to hide that in any sense, but he also doesn't put a hate on them either. Like, I hate my dad because he's like this, or I hate my mom because he's like this, or because she is like this. I just think that, you know, I don't know why. Maybe it's a generational thing too, of like, this is just like, okay, I guess this is none of my business, but I just have to go along with this emotionally damaging thing that's going to change the perspective of my entire life.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a personal thing. It seems like, right? I don't know.
I would handle my parents' divorce differently. Just saying, huh?
No, well, I don't know. My dad isn't being cucked. So that's what I'm saying. I can't attest to this situation. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I mean, we're going way off of the movie itself, but I do think that that's at least my personal perspective of why I like this movie so much. Mm-hmm. So the film was originally conceived like as early as 1999. His sister Anne, who I think is the one played by Julia Butters. Shout out to Julia Butters. She has not been treated the best since Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The last time I seen her was The Gray Man. I think she plays the sister Anne. I'm not 100% sure on that, but in 1999 she wrote a screenplay called I'll Be Home. But Spielberg was too hesitant to make this movie. This more playing into the I wouldn't say the cowardice, but the unconfrontational nature of this family is that he didn't want to make this movie while his parents were alive because he didn't want to hurt their feelings of like, this is how I actually feel about what happened in my life. But it was later revealed that his mother did push him to make this movie for a very long time. Like, when are you going to tell your story? Like, you have a story worth telling. You're not just a great storyteller. And I know that he, you know, in his 20s and 30s, that he really disconnected from his father. I don't know if he's always had a great relationship with his mother or not, but yeah, this is kind of like it's weird to think of like Steven Spielberg as like a tortured artist. You know what I mean? Because that is not how he portrays himself at all. You know, he's like, hey, it's Steven Spielberg, the guy who made Animaniacs, the guy who made Jurassic Park, the guy who made Hook, and hey, come here, come sit on my lap and let me show you how movies are made, kid. You know, like he really has kind of just made the best out of this like thing that happened to him as a kid, which is even more like, you know, I don't really know as a child of separated parents either of like, is it selfish for us to be like, yo, this is all about me actually? You know what I mean? Like that's a whole nother deep therapy psychological study that I'm not ready to get into about the like, well, what about me and how I feel, you know? Because I don't know, maybe some people do feel like your whole world should revolve around me because I'm your child, but the older you get, the more you see your parents as people, the more their decisions start to make sense.
Yeah, like, yeah. So it is interesting that
because I mean, would he have really wanted his mom to just be unhappy for the rest of her life? And no, she doesn't have a good reason for why. Well, it's never really stated why she would have such a reason to be unhappy, other than she's just not following her heart. Like, and that's not what her heart wants, and she's caught up in a life that she doesn't want to be in. I mean, we see that she wanted to be somebody, you know, so I can see how that got pushed onto her son. This, like, you know, she's a creative force. She plays the piano. She's been on TV. She wanted to be a star. And I'm sure like many people, her mom was low key Pearl, but without the craziness. You know what I mean? So that was another thing like I kind of took away, and it was like, this is a person who's just unhappy with how their life turned out. And yeah, she has kids that she loves. She's lucky enough to have two people she's in love with, but she's just not a happy person.
Because like I guess how this movie shows it is Sammy's not into movies at all, and they go to one movie, The Greatest Show on Earth, and he sees he's trained, or like just special effects. What would it be that at that time? And it just blows
pretty
his
fucking
mind.
Good too. I'd never seen The Greatest Show on Earth, but that train crash, I was like, that looked pretty good for 1950 whatever. Like, that did look cool.
So he sees that, and I guess because we know it's Steven Spielberg, that is his inciting moment in his life where he is like, I'm going to be a filmmaker.
Yeah, it was the first movie he ever saw.
And
so it's not that he wasn't into films. He had never seen one. He
and
was
then
6 years old.
His mom got him the camera because he kept crashing the trains, right? And I guess that's where the relatability to between the trauma within his mom and wanting to make films comes from, is because his mom handed him the camera. But I have always, I guess, it was interesting to me that the two connected so far, because isn't The Greatest Show on Earth the reason you like want to make movies, or is it the camera? Like, is it getting the camera and recording that with your mom, or is it watching The Greatest Show on Earth?
I mean,
or is
why
it
can't
both?
it be both?
No, because it's like, why would your mom doing what she do ruin making movies for you if it was The Greatest Show on Earth?
Well, I mean, I don't get where you're coming from with this, because he would have never felt this way if he hadn't captured those things on camera that he wasn't supposed to see. He would have never fallen out of love with making movies if he hadn't. In his mind, Steven Spielberg capturing that on camera, like his thing that he loved so much, destroyed his family in his head.
Yeah, I guess that's because we get the whole context here, but that wasn't. That's what I'm saying. Like, it wasn't that though.
But that's
because
a child's perspective of like, it's my fault that I used to think that too. Like, is it my fault that my parents are getting separated, or is it us? Like, what happened? You know?
Yeah. I guess I just was saying like the connection between the filmmaking and the mother here seems to be like because of an incident that happened. I mean, she recorded the train thing though, right? Like, she's the one recording it.
Him?
Yeah.
I think it's him. I mean, I know she helped him in the beginning. No, it was him, because when they show it and she's like, how many times did you film this? Because he's using a Super 8 camera, so there's no editing. He was like, oh, I had to do it over and over and over again. And he's like, but don't worry, I took care of the toys. They're not like destroyed.
Yeah.
So he did do it himself.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. Interesting. And like I said, I have a lot of questions with this movie more than I have. I'm still trying to piece together what he's trying to get, what he's trying to say here. So,
I mean, like you said, this is somebody's emotional baggage and like what should be therapy in a movie. So it's not like this is going to be clear cut and just over, okay, I washed my hands of that. I understand all the trauma in your life.
It's interesting though. It's like one of the movies I walked away with, and instead of having like when I think about it, it'd be like, oh, okay. It'd be like, it just made me have more questions. The more I sat and thought about it, I was like, oh, well. But it's based on his real life, so that like this actually all happened.
I don't like Steven Spielberg's life story.
It'd be like, huh, that's weird. That's okay.
Yeah. I mean, okay. I don't know. I can't tell if you actually like this movie or not. It sounds like you don't.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. As I sit here and discuss it, I was like, you just have so much more questions in terms of like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm sitting here and trying to ask Steven Spielberg questions about his life and like why his parents made these decisions, and like he probably doesn't have the answers to either. So it just seems to me like, okay, yeah, I'm trying to compare this movie to movies that I've seen this year, and I just can't. That's what it's coming down to. Is this lives in its own singular type of space.
And is that a good or bad thing?
It's an
because
unrelatable
why does it
thing.
Need to fit into the spaces of these other movies to like make sense to you?
I think it's an unrelatable thing. It's I can't relate with the choices that were made here with the characters I was presented, but because they're based in real life, they're not made up characters. I'm not given a full character development for any of these characters that there's issues with, so I don't feel anything for them because I wasn't given anything to reveal for them in the beginning. Like, I know Paul Dano's character, his dad, as somebody who was a dad, and he seems to be very smart, and in this movie he seems to care about his kids. So I'm like, what is making her unhappy here? I fail to understand, and there's no explanation here towards that. There is no like, they sit down and talk with her, and the dad seems okay with her going back to Phoenix, but she just doesn't want to be a mom either.
Well, she took the other 3 kids with her. Steven Spielberg is the one who didn't want to go with this family, because the pictures that you see at the end are of the whole family except for him and the dad.
That's right. I say so, but why did Steven not? Because of school?
Well, he's now in Hollywood where he wants to be with a chance to make movies. Why would he go back to Arizona?
Well, because weren't they in Northern California at the time?
No, at that point they were in Hollywood.
Because his dad moved, right?
After Northern California and their big home, once they were separated, he moved to. He literally lived in what's it called over there by UCLA? Brentwood, an apartment in Brentwood. Him and his dad.
But that's not okay. Because I thought IBM was in the north where they moved at first.
Yeah, but time has passed between that and then, like when she leaves and she takes all the girls back to Arizona. Time has passed. It says a whole nother year later, and that him and his dad are now in LA.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna try to convince you to like this movie, obviously, but I just, I don't know. I was a little surprised that you had so many issues with the movie.
It's not issues, but it's just I guess it's because
just disagreements with how this was all.
No,
handled.
I have questions about the characters, which I would have in any other movie. So I'm trying to understand why Paul Dano's character, his dad, is so okay with the relationship that the mom and Seth Rogen's character have.
Okay, not to put you in the movie writer spot here and be like, well, we write this movie, but how would you have liked it to be handled? Or how do you think would have been a more like, I don't know, what would have made it a better movie or like answered your question?
I would assume there would be some type of conflict between the mom and dad if this is something that's tearing the family apart, if either of them want to keep the family together.
Yeah, but I mean, these conflicts don't usually take place in front of kids. It's not like, hey, let's line up the whole
But
family.
we're the audience. That's what I'm saying. They don't have to be in front of the kids, but I'm the audience
I do
member.
think that's why, because this is told from his perspective as a kid. It isn't like he's telling an outside story. So for him, at least, it seems like this is the information that he is presented with. And no, it doesn't fucking make sense.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Be like it's
because divorces rarely do to a kid. You know what I mean? They're not like, oh, okay, I'm 10 years old and my parents just got divorced. This makes logical sense to me. You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't.
But because he's making it at an 80-year-old, that's my question is, don't you think there should be some type of like,
Okay,
I watched this and how am I supposed to feel about Steven Spielberg's mom?
I don't think you are supposed to feel like I hate her or I love her. I think it's just the presenting her as a person and being like, this is like, I'm just laying it all out there that this is who my mom was. It's not that she's a good person or a bad
And so that's what I'm
person.
saying. My receptiveness to that is,
So it is up to you. Do you hate his mom or do you
no,
like his
I
mom?
don't feel indifferent to it whatsoever. Like it doesn't change my life or it doesn't do anything to me because I'm like, you haven't presented me a negative or because you don't seem to care. His dad doesn't seem to care that she was in love with somebody else, and he didn't seem to care that she was in love with somebody else. So am I supposed to take this as trauma, or am I supposed to take this as this is just my story?
I think probably that this is just my story. I do think we probably got off on the wrong foot by saying that this is like trauma because it didn't ruin his life. But
I
it's
mean,
just
yeah,
something
that's
that
what I'm
he had to
saying. Be
live
like,
with.
it didn't ruin his life. So there is no conflict in this movie. This movie is an autobiographical look at what happened in Steven Spielberg's life. So there is no conflict here. There is no like, what is the issue that's going to happen here that's going to stop Steven Spielberg from being a great filmmaker?
Yeah, I mean, these are also just coming of age like tropes. That this is a reason why people do not like coming of age movies. Is like for all of these problems that you have.
The issue of what you said though is no, not the issue, but the problem is that his love for filmmaking was stunted by him
A personal
recording.
thing that happened to him.
Yeah, recording, using the thing that he loved to find out something but then he was okay with it. That's my thing. It's not like in the movie he's not. It's like it hurts him, but it's not like he grows any hate towards his mom. He doesn't ask any questions.
Well,
he just accepts it as it
There
is.
is a part in the movie where after his parents announce their divorce, he goes right back to work making movies again, right? And his sister mentions to him like, "How could you be so cold?" And he's like I do think it is that like that selfishness that is put out there from the uncle and the mother character of like being an artist is being selfish and being like, you know what, this sucks and like this has stunted me, but honestly, fuck all of this. I don't care. Like I really do not care because I am so selfish that I'm only involved in the thing that I'm not gonna let this get in the way of the thing, you know, which I understand is confusing, but this is also told from a teenager's perspective. It isn't like this is a 80-year-old man telling the 80-year-old man's story. Like he's trying to tell it like from that point of view of when he was 15 years old, 14 years old.
Because he does resent her for a bit in the film.
Well, of course. Be like, yes, you're going to resent your mother for a bit, but can you really hate your mother? Be like, unless she like actively was injuring him or whatever, like as bad as it sounds, like that shit is between you and dad. Like that is not, your relationship to him has nothing to do with your relationship to me, even though we think of it like it should, you know, in the perfect happy family. But who's from a perfect happy family? Nobody. Like that's part of the myth, right? Is this happy American family? Like Steven Spielberg, you would think of him as like the quintessential like American story, you know, like he came from this happy family. His dad was the perfect American man. He had a good job at IBM and his mother was this wonderful housewife. And then it's like, no, once you unravel those layers, it's like, I'm kind of just as quote unquote messed up as everybody else is, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't think that this film is meant to give you answers about his parents. Like my dad sucked and my mom sucked too. Like, I just don't think that that's the point of this movie.
Because they are just people, and I understand he's like, well, he was never going to hate either of them. But I'm also like, as the audience, as in terms of like feeling how I should about this movie is who is, quote unquote, the villain and hero of this movie.
No one. There is none.
There is none. Yeah. That's what I mean. So I don't, that's how I take the movie then. That's what I mean. It's like, that was cool. You know, like that was something he felt like he had to say, but I also do feel like if he's had these conversations with his parents or not, it does seem like something. Yeah, I guess it's closing the chapter on them being dead and wanting to say the story, but it seems like if his mom was pushing for this movie to be made, why didn't he make it when she was alive?
Well, I don't know. Those are way too personal questions.
Yeah.
Why didn't you make this movie? Like,
That's what I mean. The audience for this, who seems that it's for, is not for me.
Well, what do you mean by that?
Because this audience, this is what we're talking about. Like there's no necessarily plot here to compare to any other movie. It lives in a one-on-one island, right? So I don't this who is the audience for this movie? Me
No, him.
and his family, right? Because
I
if his
wouldn't say
sisters
your
are watching
family,
this
yeah.
movie, they'd be like, "Oh, it makes sense why." He knew, but he didn't say anything because he didn't want to destroy the illusion of family, but it was destroyed anyway. So it's for them, but I don't necessarily feel like this film is made for anybody but Steven Spielberg, which is fine. But okay, you make films for the audiences that you want in these films. So if it's a one of one, that's okay. But I'm gonna take it as that. That's how I feel about it.
How do you feel about Steven Spielberg overall?
Um,
Because I heard you being a little, I would say, dismissive of his career since the past like 20 years.
he has movies like Jaws. Like I really like Jaws, but everything else does seem very. Maybe because it makes so much sense. He comes from something that doesn't make very much sense and kind of could be a negative situation. He kind of has a positive outspin on a lot of his films. I mean, unrealistically positive spins into his films. I think when compared to you compared him to Martin Scorsese, for example, like I do like Martin Scorsese more than I like Steven Spielberg, and I just think it's because it's fantasy versus reality, and I think I side more with this is actually how stuff is as opposed to this is how we wish stuff was, or obviously you like Jurassic Park is something I grew up as a kid like really loving, and then now it seems to be the quintessential thing that's really wrong with the Marvel robot. Like it's movies like Jurassic Park and those blockbusters and making those movies that are necessarily not relatable to a fundamental like movies that the rest of the world makes, but just are entertainment. And those movies are what I can't compare them to something that Martin Scorsese makes. And Jaws seems to be the only one for me specifically that trumps kind of like this is a horror movie. This seems to be very dynamic to this story driven, but everything else that he kind of makes is very very fantasy driven.
What about the films like The Color Purple and Schindler's List, like where he's gone
See,
completely the other way, and he's like, no, this is why I'm just as good or better than Martin Scorsese or whoever.
Because Schindler List is really good movie. And I think
is he wrong to want to be entertaining, although he can make the quote unquote best movie or like the highest art movie?
He's not wrong, but he is the forefronter for blockbusters, and is not blockbusters what's wrong with movies now?
Yeah, but not the ones he made. Like it's not his fault that the ones that come after are bad.
Yeah, but it's the movies that he has made, the genre that he got famous for. That's why I was trying to point out, be like he hasn't made those films in a long time, and isn't that his thing?
Well,
Nobody.
No, I mean, he's grown past that.
Yeah, which is because he's 50 years, like you said, 50 years, and
Well,
he
so
also
why would
wants
he still
to prove.
make blockbuster movies or like the same thing? Like, he doesn't have any involvement with the Jurassic World movies or the whatever. Like I do honestly think that movies like the BFG or whatever, like although I think that's a piece of trash movie, like I'm sure that actually does mean a lot to him. Of like I love that story. Like I would love to make this fairy tale and
Or Tintin.
or well, yeah, but people love Tintin. That's like this is one of the great animated movies from one of our master filmmakers. Or even something like Hook, you know what I mean? Like that's the ultimate fantasy movie. Like Steven Spielberg has never shied away from the I want to make a fairy tale movie, or he does whatever the hell he wants. I mean, this is a guy who Stanley Kubrick trusted with making artificial intelligence. This is someone who Alfred Hitchcock was intimidated by because he made Jaws. Like we're not talking about somebody like it's so hard to even compare him to anybody. Like there is nobody like him. I guess his only comparison would have been George Lucas, but the story has been written on George Lucas. He was bullied out of filmmaking. Honestly, he made 3 bad movies and decided, well, you know what? Then I'm taking my toy box and I'm never gonna make another movie again.
Yeah.
And Steven Spielberg has the balls to be like, much like Kevin Durant joining the Warriors. Like, guess what? Don't care. Be like, I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I want to do, and you can call me hokey or mainstream or whatever. But I know I'm not.
He's not mainstream, though.
There's a very strong confidence in the movies that Steven Spielberg makes.
Because he's not mainstream now, that's for sure.
Which is like, honestly, like I do think of it as like that's just like straight up disrespectful. I feel like that Steven Spielberg is considered out of fashion nowadays, but not by anyone who matters, but by the general public.
But because
these are the people who grew up on his movies. What do you mean you're out on these now? Because he doesn't make ET anymore.
Yeah, or like that's what I'm saying is if the audience he's also making movies for films is only him, then people are not going to be interested in these movies that he's making.
I do really like some of his later stuff, not like in the not the tens, but the 2000s. So like I love Artificial Intelligence. I really like Minority Report. Like I do think that's one of his better movies overall, and I do think that for me personally, my favorite genre of Steven Spielberg is the science fiction. Like I do really think that that is where he thrives the most, because I think someone as creative and as intelligent as him can really push those creative boundaries, you know. And maybe that's not what you're getting in The Fablesman, although it's a gorgeous, well crafted movie. It's like that's one thing you're gonna get for sure. You could not like the subject matter of this movie, but you cannot be like, this looks bad. You know what I mean? Like he's too far gone to be bad at making movies. Like maybe he could lose his way in the story itself, or just kind of miscalculating like what people would like Ready Player One, which is like, I don't know how people feel about that movie. Actually, I think it's god awful, but like in my opinion, that is the worst Steven Spielberg movie I've seen, other than like. I'm trying to think of a movie of his that well, it's a cheap shot, but like, or like the second Jurassic Park movie or something like that, which is, or Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which is like, that's a cash grab. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really judge those. Like, I don't think you can compare Jaws to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, because one of them is so far removed from and bastardized from what it once was that it's like, okay, well, you know, he's literally contractually obligated to, like be part of these, you know what I mean? Where he can't really get out of it, you know? But no, I mean, I overall, I'm not saying anything new here. Like that, I just think he's one of a kind and an extremely talented filmmaker, and the only and the last of a certain type of movie maker, honestly.
I mean, he is unique, and he is especially in the era that he's from. George Lucas is the only comparable, I guess.
And it's not really.
Yeah, I guess James Cameron. I don't know.
That's on terms of scale.
But they don't have as much work. But I think that's what's interesting about James Cameron is James Cameron knows the type of filmmaker that he is, and just comes every couple of years with a couple of fucking just, you know, I'm gonna capture your attention type films.
It's an event.
Yeah, and
Steven Spielberg is very much a working director. Like, I'm sure if you look at what's in production from his production side versus like the stories he has in development of like, I bet you he has 5 active movies at any given time of like, any one of these could be next.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of person he is. He isn't like I don't necessarily know why Martin Scorsese doesn't get to make movies as often as he would probably like. Maybe, you know, the older he gets, it's that Kubrick method of I want to live life and let the movie come to me. But we see from even a young age that is not how Steven Spielberg was. Steven Spielberg's got the mind of like a podcaster of like, every week I need to put out a different one. We need to get to work, do this. And he just perfectly matches that like artist versus the like old Hollywood studio system of, look, we got to crank these things out. I want to get these movies made. This is what I like doing, is making movies. I don't want to do anything else, while also still being extremely entertaining and having these artistic touches that are iconic to him. And you know a Steven Spielberg shot when you see one, you know what I mean? And that is that's something not every director can say has.
Yeah, you talked about like a couple lens flares in here. They do always show up in his movies. There are certain ways that he shoots that I mean, there's no argument that I don't think he's a good director. I do think he just has a certain type of he's genre himself in my head in terms of what kind of films he makes. And I don't know if I necessarily hold those type of films to such a like
they're not real movies.
Or no, they're movies. They're movies. That's what they are. They are movies. And so sometimes I don't know if I'm necessarily how much can I connect to a movie? You know, I mean, as a kid, yes, like they are entertaining. Yes. Were they my favorite movies as a kid? Yes. But growing up, how much can I really take from a fairy tale story? I don't think personally. Maybe that's really dark of me to say, but that's just
a personal thing.
Yeah, like
I don't know if that's a fair objection to be like, not to put this on you, be like, but I'm dead inside, so Steven Spielberg's movies are bad.
Yeah, or like not bad, but I'm just saying, like they don't necessarily make me feel like that's not something I like. Wow, that is the reason why I come to watch storytelling.
I prefer to want to take a shower after the movie. I've just
Like I could because it's like there's
I need to wash
millions
this
of
off me.
there's millions of TV shows. We've talked about the Disney arc. We talked about Black Panther. Like in Disney arc, this is what happens and it was happy ever after ending. And that is how every Steven Spielberg movie ends. Besides all the ones he's decided to not veer into being what he was known for, which is okay. But
I mean, he's a king in two worlds. This guy does both.
But that's what, in terms of, do audiences want that from him? I don't know. I don't know what audiences want from Steven Spielberg, because it does seem to be that no one cares
from anything anymore.
Because
Honestly,
like they don't seem to care for him anymore. Because like you said, did West Side Story do good?
no, it flopped, and it was day and date release with Disney Plus, I believe, where they just were like, guess what? This is just going to be on Disney Plus.
Yeah, so I do think there's why was it on Disney Plus?
Because they technically own it.
West Side Story?
Well, yeah, I think it was under the Fox acquisition or something like that. I don't know if it was made from Universal. That's why.
Okay. Yeah, but
It's on, that's how I watched
so
it.
those like we talked about the Animaniacs, like Steven Spielberg's more general, more known films all seem to carry those same tropes. Indiana Jones, at the end of the day, everything is solved, right? Or the bad people lose and he wins. And those necessarily, like they're movies, yes, but I don't necessarily attribute to, they make me think about them the next day. Be like, yeah, Indiana Jones won. It's a movie, you know? So I do think he is the master at what he does. There's no one better than him at what he does, but that is what he does, is make those. And he, like you said, he does thread both worlds. He has made films that are Oscar nominated, but that doesn't mean anything either. In other films that we've talked about, those are points that we might bring up, or general consensus, and those aren't points we usually give any points for. So that's why it's interesting for this to be like, well, they liked Munich, but like, well, who liked Munich? Like certain directors where he was trying to make something that is Oscar bait, or is that like, I just find it interesting that certain directors.
So at what point do we? Because it is weird criteria, because a lot of the times we bring up the Oscars to be like, well, fuck them. But when they get it right, we are like, see, they got it right. And I do think it's the same thing with like money as well, right? That there will always be a balance of like, well, when something bad makes a lot of money, you're all wrong. And then when something good makes a lot of money, oh, well, this is a dub for cinema. See, people want good stuff. So I do think it's a unfair and unvalid like criticism of movies that basically everybody takes part in, that we most likely shouldn't, of like the ranking, or okay, well, it made a lot of money, well, it's bad, well then no, that means it's good. Like these are this is going off on a bigger problem with the state of movies in general, but it's like we aren't looking at it like it's really art anymore. Like I don't think that we fall into this category a lot because we actively try not to. But it is kind of a like, well, who is this for? Be like, well, I don't know. Do movies have to be for anybody? Like it's just, they're weird arguments to throw about, because we do, not just us, everyone uses them inconsistently. You know what I mean? Like Toni Collette should have been nominated for an Oscar, but she wasn't, so fuck them. But if she was, be like, oh, see, they got it right. They know what's up. Like, and that's just part of the horrible movie business side of the thing, of how you have to look at it. Well, dollars equals profits. Nobody cares about Steven Spielberg anymore because it doesn't make any money. Like, but it does get recognition he gets the recognition from his peers and the like. I don't know about the general movie going audience, but like the people who are supposed to think that he's important do think that he is, so it'd be like the Academy, his peers, his place in the history of filmmaking, So why do a bunch of random people like me and you get to decide that he's no longer relevant? And I'm not saying that you're trying to do that, but I'm just saying me and you are the common folk. So these are opinions that other people have, like I always do not like that you do the devil advocate thing for things that I know you don't actually feel that way, because then I'm like, so why are we doing this though? Why are we giving the other side that we don't even agree with? But yeah, I don't know. I just for him specifically, I feel like it's like, isn't he past all of this, and doesn't he deserve to be past all of this? Of like who cares how much money my movie makes, or like shouldn't my name be enough to just like, okay, we're gonna do it?
But I guess what I'm trying to get at is, because my next question is, do you have the budget for this film?
Yeah, it's $40 million.
it seems like why would the studio want to take that risk every single time? They do give Steven Spielberg $40 million, but A24 has to give all these other auteurs $5 million. Be like Robert Eggers had to
about using auteur now after we talked about tar.
It's
is that a term we still like to use now? I mean, I'm just asking, for the future.
I mean,
because, like, that is probably something I would like to kind of veer out of my vocabulary, is thinking of like, oh, this is one man's vision, and only because, like, one of the main points of tar was that, like, this is not one person's vision, and no art other than, I guess, painting probably is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
because movie making by its nature cannot be auteur driven, right? Unless you were like literally like, I edit this, wrote this, directed this, starred in this, like.
I guess like that would retroactively, I don't know, that kind of takes directors credit from them too for a lot of things too. But obviously there's a cast to all of this, and we've done a great way to highlight that for I think most of our episodes. But I forgot what was the question to this, or what we were talking about relating to this.
It was about the money. Like, why does A24 and other studios have to give their directors so little money?
Yeah, because who produced this though? Do you know?
The Fabelmans?
Yeah, the Universal.
Okay, one second. Here, we're gonna start pulling up some of the. This is what I like about doing this, and I wish we've done this more. Of like, let's really get into these weeds. You know what I mean? So, you wanted to know how much this movie cost?
Because you said 40, right?
Yeah, and it is a Amblin Entertainment.
It's his own.
So Amblin is the production company, and Reliance. So this means Steven Spielberg paid for this movie, because honestly, he pays for most of his movies through Amblin. The distributor is Universal Pictures, which is like, this is the place that he built. You could say, oh, the 30s, the 40s, whatever. Be like, but this is the house that Steven Spielberg built, and it's the reason you have multiple theme parks. It's the reason you have the ability to just kind of get away with doing whatever you want. Like, he's one of the tent poles of this studio.
I think I was going to say, I do remember the pretty noteworthy Universal logo coming up and then changing into the Amblin logo. I had never really seen that.
Yeah. He's like, no. We're not going to, you don't speak about Universal without speaking about me.
So, yeah, I mean, he paid for it himself. I think does any other studio.
Well, I don't want to make it say like it's out of his own pocket.
No, but it's his production company. But, but does any other studio try to take a gamble on a movie like this if it's not produced by his own? Do you think so?
No, because they're all businessmen and executives and supposedly the smartest people in the room, right? But they don't know. They don't really know shit about making movies. That's why executives don't make them. They have to hire artists.
Because movies existing, for example, you talk about people making movies about their lives. Andrei Tarkovsky made a movie about his life with a budget that is exponentially less than this budget, right? So it's not about.
That's because he's a goddamn Soviet Union Ruski.
And it's not about it being like you need a lot of money to make your movie. But Steven Spielberg, that is his whole thing. Like, everything has to look extremely cinematic or whatever to come out. So even his life has come off extremely cinematic. So my whole point of all this is saying, though, is that these films can get made and documented for his own audience, but the studios aren't going to take gambles on movies that are just made for an audience of one. So it seems like he's also not very interested in servicing that part of the.
Yeah, and I honestly believe that's because he's past that.
And he is past that. Yeah. But
he's
then
like,
I also
paid my dues to the world of cinema. Like, that's how I see it. And why would you not when you're him, you know? And it's like, it's a shame they don't do that to Martin Scorsese of like, what the fuck? Why do I have to fight to make a movie? Like, this is fucking bullshit. Like, half the reason the movies that are out today, or the directors who are even fucking making movies, is because of me. Be like Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, fucking Brian De Palma, Francis Ford Coppola. Be like, you couldn't even have this shit you have now if it wasn't for me. And now you want to turn your back on me at the end of my life? What the fuck is this all about?
Yeah, I mean, to Martin Scorsese, I don't know if that's a choice or that is him being held back. I would like to think it's a choice, considering.
I don't think so, because he talks about how he has to fight them for many, many years to get these movies made. Like Silence and The Irishman, those took a long time for him to make, because guess what? They're not The Wolf of Wall Street. He can easily get The Wolf of Wall Street made, but that's not what he wants to do. You know, The Wolf of Wall Street is basically the corporate Goodfellas. And he's like, Okay, fine. I'll do this and I'll make it fucking as good as I possibly can. It's going to be very good. But this is not what I want to do. I want to make a movie about Spanish nuns in Japan and these spreading of Christianity times, or I want to make a movie about Jimmy Hoffa and for some reason he doesn't have the ability to back it up with the like, well, I'm Steven fucking Spielberg and this could make $500 million if you make this, which is like, I'm looking at Ready Player One, 175 mil, but it made 583. So didn't that just pay for my next movie if I want to make a $40 million movie?
Yeah. Yeah.
But Martin Scorsese unfortunately doesn't have that because Martin Scorsese is even more out of the mainstream to people now. They're like, oh, he only makes gangster movies. Like, oh, whatever. It's so reductive to treat these legends this way, honestly.
So that is true in terms of Steven Spielberg in the recent times has made Ready Player One, which is absolutely
583 mil.
Is absolutely for people our age. It's not for people his age.
The previous film before Ready Player One, 50 mil budget, $180 million. Like, and that is not a fun story. That is not a Steven Spielberg. I'm gonna feel very good about family and E.T. and at the end. No. This is a movie about some extremely dark, disgusting shit that's taking place.
This could have also happened in terms of, we talked about this, that some of these movies end up making their money back. Because if this was nominated for an Oscar, who's to say this movie didn't get upstreamed, right? Which is good for him. But I'm just saying, so it does seem based off of the data that Steven Spielberg does still rack in money enough to pay for him for his own memoir.
And that is why he gets to, like, that along with the Oscar stuff. Like, it works hand in hand for him. Is like, look, I'm going to make a movie. It's going to be a certain level of good already right off the bat because I'm Steven Spielberg. Like, I don't make anything less than 3s or 3.5s, And then you're going to make a shit ton of money. Like, it's going to get Oscar buzz, right? And then you're going to let me make my next movie. And I don't know why it's starting to I don't get why when he hasn't necessarily done anything wrong.
I mean, maybe we're already thinking too hard of it, and maybe he's never had an issue.
Part of having a podcast, you got to think about these
things. He's never had an issue. Like, Steven Spielberg does have the green light. I would imagine so.
If we didn't go too far all the time and overthinking things, this podcast would be like 20 minutes long.
Yeah. But I think maybe Steven Spielberg has never had a red light for those things. He's always had the green light. So
I'm more interested in the movies that he wasn't allowed to make,
which is probably not many.
Not let him make,
or like we talked about it a couple weeks ago with for October thing. You have Toby Hooper and Poltergeist, right? All the whole thing about it being ghost directed and stuff by him, but that is Steven Spielberg in his prime. Like, during those years when we talked about him, is him just, his ideas are just coming out of his head in terms of, like, Indiana, like George Lucas, let's do this, Toby Hooper, let's do this, because he had I got 6 or 5 ideas in my head that I know are just bangers that these people are gonna eat up.
Lincoln made $275 million. A fucking historical period piece drama. Daniel Day-Lewis over a quarter of $1 billion. Like, and that is a huge part why, because of Steven Spielberg. Like, it wouldn't be because, like, if someone else had made this movie, you'd feel like, no, it made $65 million and cost 64,
So yeah, so he does have it's just funny that they asked him, like, when the superhero movie, because you would think he has that grab. He has that grab technically in terms of those, but West Side Story is maybe, I don't know, in terms of them saying how much the state of cinema has changed, maybe even looking back, as far as we look back, things have changed drastically. But the fact that West Side Story wasn't as good as, these numbers are crazy. Like, these are numbers, like, I know people like those movies, but they did commercially well as well.
This is what real movies make.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Like, this is the most a real movie could make. Like oh wow, this got really good word of mouth, and now damn, I got Lincoln fever. It'd be like, Lincoln is going ham right
equivalent now. To, or like inflation, ad for inflation, like, oh, this is what The Godfather would have made before. Like, a movie like The Godfather, like, that's why it's successfully and critically reviewed very well. But it is interesting that it seems like even up until when Lincoln was made, that he still had both sides going on. Like, this film made a bunch of money for what it is, and it also got nominated.
Bridge of Spies, 40 million, 165 in box office. So, yeah, I mean, obviously it's always going to vary because Steven Spielberg rarely ever does the same thing over. Like, he repeats the themes, but this is just who he is, and that's part of storytelling. Christopher Nolan, every single one of his movies is about time. Fucking Quentin Tarantino, every single one of his movies is about how much he loves B movies. You know what I mean? Steven Spielberg, it really does boil down to family, honestly. Like, that's what he's the most interested in telling stories about, whether it's fucking War of the Worlds and a father trying to reconnect with his children in the face of an apocalypse, or fucking E.T., where comes from a broken family with no dad, and he's trying to cope with the feelings of what it's like to not have a dad. Is that this is the recurring theme in his work. And I do think that honestly only movies like Ready Player One are the ones where he explicitly tries to leave that behind, are the ones where he doesn't really harp on that. Like, I'm sure The Post isn't about family. No, it's about these declassified papers that from the Pentagon.
I think that's post, you said the aughts, as they say.
Yeah. So
into the 10s is when he really just did start making stuff that would arguably be subject matter that does have nothing to do with what his known signature is for.
So the 70s, he was just trying to make what he wanted. It just so happened to be Duel, The Sugarland Express, Jaws, and Close Encounters, right? The 80s is really where he blew up into that, I'm the biggest movie maker that exists. Jaws, Indiana Jones, whatever else he did during that time,
produced.
Yeah, all the shit he's produced. On top of being one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, he's also one of the greatest producers of all time. And Back to the Future, Roger Rabbit, just these other very important pieces of cinema that he's also been involved in from a different standpoint. He helped bring Shrek to the big screen. Yes, his greatest accomplishment, right? Yep. But in the 90s is where he really started getting serious. You know what I mean? Amistad, fucking The Color Purple, Schindler's List, and then in the 2000s he flip-flops. I do think that he gets in and out of these phases of I want to make a serious movie, and then no, I want to make War of the Worlds and AI and Minority Report, where I want to push the technology as far as it can go. So, I mean, this has gone on far too long probably, but I really just wanted to use this episode to just gush about Steven Spielberg and talk about a pretty good movie. It's like you said, it really isn't about the movie itself. It's a celebration of his life, this in his career. So that's what I came to this episode to do. I like the movie. No, I don't think it's the best movie he's ever made. No, I don't think it's the best movie of this year, but I got a quality fucking movie from one of the most quality directors, and it's just nice to fucking have that, honestly.
I think it is just a testament to the career that he's had, and that's why he's also kind of said, I think I've warranted to be able to give myself a fictional last name of the Fabelman.
Yeah, is there someone who's more of a storyteller than this guy? It's really, no, there isn't. He's I don't know about the great American writers, but if I had to say who was the great American storyteller, I'd be probably Steven Spielberg, honestly.
I know, Indiana Jones is all he wrote that, right?
No, he's only written 2 movies. It's this movie and I can't remember the other one right now.
Oh, George Lucas wrote.
Well, no, Lawrence Kasdan did.
That's what I was gonna say.
So he never writes his own movies. He's only written 2. It's this one and one other one.
Because that's what I was gonna say is in terms of people have their big issues with bringing books into movies, and I think that he's been probably the most successful in terms of bringing something like Jurassic Park to what someone who was reading the book. Well, I've heard arguments on that, but I would say it's the closest to somebody could actually make it to how good it would be in the book, and I think that's where he really did take is putting the imagination onto the screen, and he really did take that with E.T., and all of those Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
He's just so cool. Honestly, there really is no other way to put it. He's Mr. Hollywood. He's Mr. Movie. You know what I mean? We talked about him when we talked about Akira Kurosawa and how he was at the forefront of fronting that no, this is the fucking guy. This is the master. He had a very good and personal close relationship with Stanley Kubrick for many years, and Stanley Kubrick saw him as the next me, and not in terms of the telling these cold, calculating, quote unquote depressing stories, but of just this guy fucking understands making movies. You know what I mean? And then how many other people that he has inspired and helped make movies too. I can't think of a better person to be the face of movies than Steven Spielberg.
That's true.
So yeah, I love you, Stevie. Please keep making as many movies as you can for the rest of your wonderful life, and you will always have a spot in the Grand Cinema Hotel. You don't even gotta ask. Like, hey, I'll kick someone else out of the room for you.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, if the Grand Cinema Hotel, the lobby should have a painting of him behind it. Just be like, thank you. Oh man, so I don't have much more to say about Steven Spielberg or the Fabelmans, but other than don't be surprised if this wins an Oscar, but it probably shouldn't. No, because I obviously do like Tar more or whatever, but I'm like, Todd Field and Steven Spielberg are not even in the same fucking ballpark. We're not talking about the same thing.
Yeah, no.
So
yeah.
what? Be like, it's like, it reminds me of Pulp Fiction. Like, you're not even in the same fucking ballpark. You're not even playing the same fucking sport. Like, these are two completely different things. So yeah, man, go see the Fabelmans when you can. Happy Thanksgiving. Fucking, I hope this doesn't bring up any repressed trauma between you and your parents who separated. But, like, subscribe, comment, do the things we need you to do to keep this show running, man. Love you, all of you. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, or don't, depending on how you feel about the holiday. But we love you. Goodbye.
Bye.